Howdy, everyone. Wes Wyleven here. You know, I heard this here channel had a couple of really good videos about anti-authoritarianism and the dangers of falling for authoritarian mindsets. So, I figured I would come in and give my 2 cents about some things and about show the real origin of authoritarianism and how they gain power. To help me out with that is my good friend and a loyal assistant, Odar. Odar, how you doing today?
Wes, this is literally my channel.
Details. Now, one of the things that I think that we should really focus in on is going into exactly how authoritarians gain power in an otherwise meritocratic system and how they can use the language of individualist libertarian mindsets and governmental styles and culture in general, and how they use the wording, they use the ideology, and they use the mentality that's popular in those systems and subvert it, turn it into what they want, and then push their authoritarians. Now, Odar, what do you think about that?
I think it was literally my idea, and I asked you to be here.
Details.
Okay, but actually, though. So, I started reading Hoppa, however the fuck you want to say that moron's name.
Hoppa. There's an E at the end, so it's Hoppa.
Exactly. And anyone who says otherwise is a filthy communist. So anyway, I was reading Hoppa, and I'm getting through the introduction, and I realize, holy shit, you already have to be so fucking demoralized to even accept the framing that he states. And I realized there was a level deeper that I had to go before even starting to break down his work and the work of others like Moldbug. Will fucking get to him. That I had to go a level deeper into the philosophy of it all and realize, how can people even start to think this might be a good idea to accept? And I remembered there was a former KGB agent, very very popular back when Wes was in his middle ages, who talked all about how authoritarians grab power. And that man's name is Yuri Bezmenov. Now, I've asked Wes to be here because he is more knowledgeable on this subject than I am. I am still wading into all of this. Wes is a seasoned adventurer when it comes to this stuff. He has been generous enough to help me out in this journey of breaking down demoralization and the points that Yuri's going to make here. Because even though he's talking about communism in the USSR, this is universally applicable information.
Oh, yeah. So one of the things that you have to remember is the tactics that the KGB used, which is threefold: demoralization, ideological subversion, and a tactic called active measures. Now, Yuri will go into all three of them over the course of the 2 videos that we'll be covering, because unfortunately, Yuri only really ever made, or was really a part of, 2 videos. There was his lecture, and there was his interview with a man named G. Edward Griffin, which, by the way, another name you want to look into. The interview is a very good introduction to the things that he is talking about. So that is the one we are going to be watching first, I believe.
Yes, we're going to start with the interview.
And you wanna pay attention to exactly what he says, and also keep in mind while you're listening to Mr. Bezmenov, pause the video occasionally, and we'll be doing it too. Pause this video occasionally and reflect on, have I seen this happening in real time in my life? Have these tactics, have these words, has these mentalities, these ideologies, these tactics been used in my personal life, or has it been used against people that I cared about? Because I'll bet you money it has. Because even though these tactics are Soviet in origin, the methods have been adopted by several groups over the years. Those groups include Muslim extremists, they include the Chinese government, and yes, they do include the modern iteration of the American Democrat Party. And I don't know as well, but the British Labour Party as well. These demoralization tactics, these active measures, this ideological subversion has been used by every, and I hate using this term, Odar, you know how much I hate using this term, but finger quotes, left-wing ideological position for the past 80 years. because the origin of it is all the same. The origin of it is authoritarian collectivism. That's the base.
I made you reference the Overton window. Yuri is a fantastic speaker when it comes to this stuff because he lived it. And it's a shame that his name is not as well known as it really should be, because he basically just talks about the first phases of what we're dealing with now. So shall we get started?
Absolutely. And by the way, I just want to say, if you are more on the normal side, you are more on the average side, and this interview looks familiar, it's because it was used word for word in some areas in the trailer and in some cutscenes of a video game called Call of Duty Cold War. They used clips of Yuri Bezmenov's video. And yes, I was seen way back in the day, before I met any of you guys in Cabal or anything else, I was seen in the comments of those trailers going, oh, whenever there was someone going, holy crap, this guy sounds cool, who is he? I'd be like, oh yeah, his name's Yuri Bezmenov, you should look him up. Because I have been preaching the gospel of our Lord and Savior, Yuri Bezmenov, for over a decade now. And it is a crime that more people don't know him. And hopefully, this video, along with many other times that I have pushed him myself, and the many times in the future that Odar here will be pushing him, no doubt, we will be making this more and more aware as time goes on.
Yeah, Wes, we get it. You're old. Shall we begin properly here? And
absolutely.
Holy shit, guys. You're not prepared for how hard this goes in the first minute if you haven't heard this before.
My father was, he's on the left here, my father was officer of the General Staff of the Soviet Army. He was inspector of land forces, Soviet troops stationed in countries like Mongolia, Cuba, East European countries. This is the picture taken at the entrance of my Institute of Oriental Languages. It's a part of Moscow State University. As every Soviet student, I was, quote-unquote, volunteering for harvesting grain in Kazakhstan. By the end of my training in school, I was recruited by the KGB. This picture was taken on that day, and you can see again how happy it feels to be recruited by the KGB. Pay special attention to number of bottles on the table. One of my functions was to keep foreign guests permanently intoxicated the moment they land at Moscow airport. In 1967, the KGB attached me to this magazine, Look magazine. A group of 12 people arrived to USSR from United States to cover the 50th anniversary of October Socialist Revolution in my country. From the first page to the last page, it was a package of lies.
So yeah, when I said he goes hard immediately, he goes hard immediately.
Oh yeah. Well, you remember what I keep saying, Odar, whenever we have our completely legitimate movie nights in Cabal? I always say, in the first couple minutes, you want to make sure you set that tone, because if you don't, people won't know what's coming. And the man who's going to be the interview here, G. Edward Griffin, he knows how to set a tone. As I said, another person you want to go into in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be getting there at some point. Don't know when, but it'll happen. Little fun history tidbit that I learned about just Russian vodka bottles just in passing at some point. Fun fact, they're not designed to reseal. They're supposed to be consumed entirely in one serving.
I mean, they are Russian.
Exactly.
So.
Vodka historically has been used to dull the temper, the emotions of the Russian people. It's been a thing forever with the Russian people. It's where Russian oligarchs made a lot of their money originally.
It could also be used to, keep the masses pliable and not prone to revolt. Could be that too. But
what? That's crazy. that never happened.
Oh yeah, liquid bread? What's that?
Beer is liquid bread. It's good for you.
Our conversation is with Mr. Yuri Alexandrovich Bezmenov. Mr. Bezmenov was born in 1939 in a suburb of Moscow. He was the son of a high-ranking Soviet Army officer. He was educated in the elite schools inside the Soviet Union and became an expert in Indian culture and Indian languages. He had an outstanding career with Novosti, which was and still is, I should say, the press arm or the press agency of the Soviet Union. It turns out that this is also a front for the KGB. One of his interesting assignments was to brainwash foreign diplomats when they visited Moscow. And he'll tell us a little bit about how they did this and how they planted information which eventually wound up in the press of the free world. He escaped to the West in 1970 after becoming totally disgusted with the Soviet system, and he did this at great risk to his...
Real quick, just to clarify some things, because we might have some Zoomers or some people who are a little younger listening eventually. So I do want to clarify what the KGB was. The KGB was the secret police, or the intelligence wing of the former Soviet Union, which is the nation that Yuri Bezmenov worked. So, just wanted to clarify.
But Wes, secret government agencies would never influence things in our country. That would never happen. Never.
Ah, definitely not.
Remember, there's no such agency that does anything like that.
And by the way, in case you were wondering, KGB stands for Komitet Gosudorstevony Bezopanosti.
Fuck's that fake language, Wes.
It is the fantasy language of Russian. Trust me, if you ever seen it typed out, you'll know it's fake.
Could you imagine if such an insane language existed? Just thank God Russia's not a real place.
Oh yeah, thank God. It's just like China. It's not real.
China.
His life. He certainly is one of the world's outstanding experts on the subject of Soviet propaganda and disinformation and active measures. Mr. Bezmenov, I'd like to begin by having you tell us a little bit about some of your childhood memories.
Well, the most vivid memory of my childhood was Second World War, or to be more precise, the end of the Second World War, when all of a sudden United States, from a friendly nation, which helped us to defeat Nazism, turned overnight into a deadly enemy. And it was very shocking because all newspapers were trying to present an image of belligerent, aggressive American imperialism. Most of the things that we were taught is that United States is aggressive power, which is just about to invade our beautiful, free, socialist country, that American CIA is dropping Colorado beetles on our beautiful potato fields to eliminate our crops. And each schoolboy had a picture of Colorado bug on the back page of his notebook. And we were instructed to go into collective fields to search for those little Colorado bugs. Of course, we couldn't find any. Neither we could find many potatoes. And that was explained again by the encroachments of the decadent imperialist power.
Does any of that sound familiar?
Well, yeah, you have to create an enemy in order for your people to rally behind. Those of you who have read Orwell would know this as the 2-minute hate. We have always been at war with Eurasia. Things of that nature. And those of you who have been around lately, it would be Nazis. It would be white supremacists. It would be evil right-wing MAGA gamer chuds, or whatever you want to call them. It's the enemy. And the enemy will always have a way to attack you, and you always need to be aware of that, and always make sure you listen to us, because we know who the enemy is because we're telling you who it is. He'll go into that more later. Yeah.
And just to clarify, the people trying to tell you that sort of thing are the enemy.
Oh, always. If there's ever so the difference, and I don't want to go too much into this right now, but one of the biggest problems that we have today is because we are multiple generations deep of our ideological enemies who have gained control in academia, popular culture, and politics, have taught generations of Americans and people all throughout the West what to think, not how to think. Critical thinking skills, a lack of critical thinking skills specifically, is one of the worst things that is happening to us right now. Because the beautiful thing about an easily pliable population that have been taught how to simply receive information, or as you might call it, programming, and to simply repeat that programming, meaning being taught what to think, is it doesn't matter who's in power at the moment. As long as they have those reins, they will just be able to input the data into the easily pliable population, and they will proceed to spit it out and say what they want you to say, think what they want you to think, and vote how they want you to vote.
Absolutely.
That's dangerous.
We are sitting at not the beginning of all this happening. This is the end product of decades of these tactics. That's why things are how they are. And we need to make people aware of them. We need to start fighting against it now. Because if we don't start fighting against it now, it's only going to get worse. And you're going to end up like the proles in 1984, where they literally can't think.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you're always going to have an enemy. And sometimes they're justified enemies, sometimes they're not justified enemies. In this instance, it is an other, so that you're able to accept the fact that your government's failing you and lying to you.
We have always been at war with Eurasia.
The anti-American paranoia, hysteria in the Soviet propaganda was to of such a higher degree that many less skeptical people or less stubborn would really believe that the United States is just about to invade our beautiful motherland, and some secretly hope that it will come true.
That's interesting.
Yes.
Well, getting back to life inside the Soviet Union or inside communist countries in general, in this country, at the university level primarily, we read and hear that the Soviet system is different from ours, but not that different, and that there is a convergence developing between all of the systems of the world, and that really it doesn't make an awful lot of difference what system you live under, because you have corruption and dishonesty and tyranny and all that sort of thing. From your personal experience, what is the difference between life under communism and life in the United States?
Well, life is obviously very much different for simple reason that the Soviet Union is a state capitalist economically. It's a state capitalism where an individual has absolutely no rights, no value. His life is nothing. It's just like an insect. He is disposable. Whereby in the United States, even the worst criminal is treated as a human being. He has a fair trial, and some of them capitalize on their crimes. They publish their memoirs in their prisons and get handsomely paid by your crazy publishers.
So I know what he's saying, but it's important to clarify that he's not really talking about capitalism as we understand it, which we'll talk about that word in a second. He's talking about the facts that, and he gets it. He wraps up the thought at the end there, where you're not treated as an individual. You got to remember, he was born and raised into the framing of the USSR. And while he's aware of that and works actively to break that programming in his mind, he's still got little hints of it buried deep in there that he still can't get out. And it's things like state capitalism versus individual capitalism.
Well, yeah, you want to keep in mind that he grew up in the Soviet Union. So he learned all of his language. He learned all of his reference points from Marx and Lenin and Tchaikovsky. And not Tchaikovsky.
Tchaikovsky.
Yeah, he learned all of his political points from that one classical music guy. Jesus fucking Christ. Oh God, what was it? I can't think of the name. The other one. I'll figure it out later.
Trotsky.
Put his face up here in the video. Thank God this ain't my channel. No, this is what he came from. So, you know, when he talks about capitalism, he doesn't mean what everyone else thinks capitalism is, which by the way, the word capitalism doesn't even need to exist, because capitalism is simply the natural state of two human beings who have stuff that each other needs. If I have a box of widgets and Odar here has a box of whatsits, and I want some of his whatsits, I'm going to trade him some of my widgets for some of his whatsits. That right there is capitalism. It is the free exchange of goods and services between individuals on various scales. That's it. That's all it is. Now, in the Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx talks about capitalism as this demonic thing that the oligarchs and the proletariats will use, or the bourgeoisie, excuse me, will use to oppress the proletariat and steal their labor, among many other things. And and again, it is using something that we all assume is true, which is, again, free exchange of goods and services amongst individuals, and twisting it so that it pushes their narrative. And when he says a state capitalist system, he means basically what we today consider to be semi-fascist, which is the state control over industry. That effectively is what the Soviet Union was, except it wasn't the state, it was, and we're using heavy finger quotes here, the party. Because the Soviet Union did not have a government, you see. It was communism in one of its purest forms. And communism in its purest forms, Odar, did not have a government, okay? It simply had the party. That's it. All right? That's it. And you might be asking yourself, well, wait a minute. Wasn't there like a president or something? And then, no. There was a party leader. Wait, wasn't there like cabinets? No. There were party officials. So it's all a matter of wordplay semantics. The long and short of it is it was what you would call fascist. I personally don't bother using that term because it's been so heavily overused to the point of irrelevancy. I just use authoritarian dictatorship, or it's just straight up authoritarianism. It's collectivist authoritarianism as opposed to individualist authoritarianism, or just straight up a dictatorial authoritarian.
Oh no, man! It sounds like a party. It sounds like a good time.
Oh yeah, parties are always fun, especially when they have total control over the military.
Well, those are the best parties. To put a little bow on it, guys, capitalism is not a word you want to use. It is just how humans interact.
Yes. In fact, whenever someone uses the word capitalism, if you feel that it's appropriate, just go, do you mean the thing that people do whenever they have stuff and they want to trade? Because I really do think that if you are on, again, finger quotes, our side of this and the next culture war, we've really got to stop using the words of the enemy in either way, because the words of the enemy will help us to start thinking like the enemy. Because remember, kids, if they control the words you use, they will control the thoughts that you think. It's a very, very stark danger that we need to be aware of, and that we have fallen for many, many times. Because we can see already people falling down this trap in multiple ways concerning this type of thing. Going down the opposite rabbit hole of the ideological, again, finger quotes, left that we are finishing up this culture war of. And you got people who are on finger quotes our side falling down the exact same rabbit hole that those people went down 10, 15 years ago, only with a different coat of paint. Something you got to be careful of. And it starts with not using their language. Very, very important. Some people argue semantics. I argue, no, I am not using the language of the enemy, because I will not let them dictate the terms of the conversation.
So anyway, spoons are very useful tools. Moving on.
The differences, of course, in the daily life are very various, depending on whom we are talking about. In my own private life, I never suffered from communism simply because I was brought up in a family of high-ranking military officer. Most of the doors were open for me. Most of my expenses were paid by the government, and I never had any troubles with the authorities or with the police. So, in other words, I would say I enjoyed, or I had good reasons to enjoy, all the advantages of so-called socialist system. My main motivations to defect had nothing to do with affluence. It was mainly moral indignation, moral protest, rebellion against the inhuman methods of the Soviet system.
Well, specifically, what did you object to?
I objected, first of all, against oppression of my own dissidents and intellectuals. And that was the most disgusting thing that I witnessed as a young man, young student, who was brought up at a very troublesome period in our history, from Stalin to Khrushchev.
And here we are at another very important point. Authoritarian systems crush the human soul. You don't even necessarily know why it does, but you can look at it and see that it's wrong. You can feel it in your gut. This is one of the most important things I think I said in one of the first videos I made. You can look at it and just know that it's wrong. Your gut instincts exist for a reason. Crushing authoritarianism, absolute totalitarian states, are completely abhorrent to humanity. You don't even necessarily need to know why it's wrong.
So, you better be careful there, Odar, because you are venturing dangerously close to the concept of a soul there.
Oh no. How awful.
Well, we won't. I won't get into a very big religious discussion here because it's not the right video for it. But if you are an American and you believe in the American system, if you believe in the American way of life, the American culture, then you have to be inherently religious, at least a little bit. You have to acknowledge the existence of God in some way, shape, or form. Now, when the founding fathers went into that, the only thing that they did was in our founding documents, the only thing that they said is we are endowed by our creator with certain inalienable rights. Now, why did they say that? Without getting too much into it, they said it because the laws that are being laid out in that document are the laws of man. And the laws of man are fallible. Fallible?
Fallible.
Fallible. God damn. I cannot word today. I apologize. Fallible. And they are subject to editing, removable, or violent overthrow if necessary. But the laws of God that are imprinted into our soul, these inalienable rights, cannot ever be changed. They are inherent to every man who has a soul, to every man who has the spark of divinity inside. Now, you can make the arguments that there are some people that do make very coherent arguments about, oh, you don't need God. You don't need a higher power in order to acknowledge these things. But in my opinion, you do. Because without that higher power, those things, those inalienable rights, are literally just on a piece of paper. The arguments of the oligarchic authoritarians or monarchic authoritarians are very, very correct in that, oh, the only thing that you have is a piece of paper. You are correct. But the piece of paper in the United States is the only one that exists, of any significance, of course, that acknowledges the fact that God gave us these rights, and nothing you, I, or any other man walking this earth can counter those things.
Very much true there, Wes. Very much true.
And you need to, and that is something that is very conveniently left out with these conversations with certain individuals, because they will immediately go to, how's that document working out for you? How's that piece of paper working out for you? Oh, really? Because it made a civilization, it made a culture, it made a government, it made a country that brought the earth from muskets and horse-drawn carriages to space vehicles in the time it took you to get from one side of the ocean to the other.
It seems our superiority has caused some controversy.
It sucks being the main character generator of the world, but them's the breaks.
So yeah, we'll go into a deeper discussion on the theological aspects of the Constitution and such documents at another time. That's not the topic of discussion here, but it is an important thing to bring up.
By the way, pause game on our board, Yuri. And by the way, we need to bring back smoked glasses again. I just want to say that, like the slightly tinted glasses. Hell yeah!
From total tyranny and oppression to some kind of liberalization. Second, when I started working for the Soviet embassy in India, to my horror, I discovered that we are millions times more oppressive than any colonial or imperialist power in the history of mankind. That my country brings to India not freedom, progress, and friendship between the nations, but racism, exploitation, and slavery, and of course economical inefficiency to this country. Since I fell in love with India, I developed something which by KGB standards is extremely dangerous thing. It's called split loyalty. When an agent likes a country
Superpower by 2020
of assignment more than his own country. I literally fell in love with this beautiful country, a country of great contrasts, but also great humility, great tolerance, and philosophical and intellectual freedoms. My ancestors used to live in caves and eat raw meat when India was a highly civilized nation 6,000 years ago. So obviously the choice was not to the advantage of my own nation. I decided to defect and to entirely dissociate myself from that brutal regime.
Mr. Bezmenov, we've read a lot about the concentration camps and the slave labor camps under the Stalin regime. Now the general impression in America is that those things are part of the past. Are they still going on today, or what is the status?
Yes. There is no qualitative change in the Soviet concentration camp system. There are changes in numbers of prisoners. Again, this is unreliable Soviet statistics. We don't know how many political prisoners are there in the Soviet concentration camps.
Right there. That's something I want to hit on real hard here, because this is an argument that's made all the time, particularly from, as Wes said at the beginning of all this, not the best term to use, but the left-wingers like to use when they're trying to argue against the United States system. The United States admits to the facts that we have a fairly large prison population. And yeah, that's a problem. But Yuri here just hit on something very important. Unreliable statistics from authoritarian regimes. We admit to it. We admit that we have this issue. And yes, it's something that needs to be worked on. But to pretend that, oh, I don't know, let's say the CCP, who, how many years ago was it, Wes, were caught on drone footage loading an entire population of Uyghur Muslims onto literal train cars to send them off to prison camps for complete cultural eradication?
It's not just that. You could fast forward that shit to 2020, 2021, where they were using a certain koof, a certain Wuhan fluhan to as an excuse to eliminate their own political and cultural enemies by the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, possibly even millions. We don't know how many people in China died because of the Wuhan flu. We do know, however, that there were we know, however, from satellite coverage of China at the time, that there were giant smoking fires outside of multiple major cities in China that were distinctly fires of burning body that were so big that they could have been noticed from satellites in space. Now, they couldn't be seen by the naked eye from space, but they were noticeable from space using satellite. How many people actually died in China from things like that? How many people actually died in the Soviet Union because they spent 50 years breaking rocks because they dared to speak out against some middle management ideologue within the party when they were in their 20s? How many people? We don't know. I don't know. You don't know. No one. Because even if those documents did exist somewhere, they were burned during one of the many ideological changes. Not ideological. The many political shifts in power in the Soviet Union over the years. Long live Comrade Stalin.
But we sure know from various sources that at each particular time there are close to 25 to 30 million of Soviet citizens who are virtually kept as slaves in forced labor camp system. The size of the population of a country like Canada is serving terms as prisoners.
Incredible.
So I would say that those intellectuals who try to convince American public that concentration camp system is a thing of a past are either conscientiously misleading public opinion, or they are not very intellectual people. They're selectively blind. They lack intellectual honesty when they say that.
Well, we've spoken about the intellectuals in this country and also the intellectuals in the Soviet Union. What about down at the broad mass level? Do the people in general, the working people, the workers in general in the Soviet Union, do they support the system? Do they tolerate it? What is their attitude?
Well, average Soviet citizen, if there is such an animal, of course, does not like the system because it hurts, it kills. He may not understand the reasons. He may not have enough information or educational background to understand. But I doubt very much there are many people who are conscientiously supporting the Soviet system. There are not such such people in USSR. Even those who have all the reasons to enjoy socialism, people like myself, who were a member of journalistic elite, they also hate system for different reasons, though. Not because they lack material affluence, but because they are unfree to think, they're in constant fear, duplicity, split personality. And this is the greatest tragedy for my nation.
So there is, if you thought me and Wes were just bloviating a second ago, there's Yuri right there talking about the fact that you don't have to be a genius to understand that the system is wrong. Literally the horse's mouth here.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing. The human soul, again, just to if you can conceive of such a thing, naturally pushes back against it. But that doesn't mean that that humanity is immune to such things. You could be corralled, you could be brainwashed, you could be cajoled into believing in these things. Of course you can, especially if you have something to gain, especially if you are convinced that you can get something from it. Absolutely.
Well, what do you think are the chances of the people actually overcoming their system or replacing it?
There is a great possibility that system will sooner or later be destroyed from within. There is a self-destructive mechanism built into any socialist or communist or fascist system, because there is lack of feedback, because the system does not rely upon loyalty of population. But until this Soviet junta is being supported by the Western so-called imperialists, that is, multinational companies, establishments, governments, and let's face it, intellectuals, so-called academia in the United States is famous for supporting the Soviet system. As long as the Soviet junta will keep on receiving credits, money, technology, grain deals, and political recognition from all these traitors of democracy or freedom, there is no hope, there is not much hope for changes in my country, and the system will not collapse by itself simply because it's being nourished by so-called American imperialism. This is the greatest paradox in history of mankind, when capitalist world supports and actively nourishes its own destroyer, destructor.
I think you're trying to tell us something.
Oh,
in
yes.
This country.
I'm trying to tell you that it has to be stopped unless you want to end up in gulag system and enjoy all the advantages of socialist equality. Working for free, catching fleas on your body, sleeping on the planks of plywood in Alaska this time, I guess. That's where Americans will belong, unless they will wake up, of course, and force their government to stop aiding Soviet fascism.
Well, you told us a moment ago why you left the system. I'd like to hear the details of how you did it. It must have been a very dangerous thing.
It was not so dangerous, it was crazy. First of all, because defecting in India is virtually impossible, thanks to very strong pressure from the Soviet government.
Excuse me, you were in India on assignment at that time.
Yes, I was working for the Soviet embassy in New Delhi as a press officer.
God, just imagine the smell.
Yeah, look, man. This was from like the '60s and '70s. I'm sure that that India was a lot better back then.
India literally being subverted by communists is better than India now.
Oh no.
And defecting for a Soviet diplomat is next to impossible. It's a suicide, as I said, because a great friend Indira Gandhi pushed a law through parliament which says, and I quote, "No defector from any country has a right of political asylum in any embassy on the territory of Indian Republic," which is a masterpiece of hypocrisy. No other defector but the Soviet one needs a political asylum. So knowing of some bureaucrat in KGB, maybe even executed, that this is normal practice. Quietly, of course, not publicly. But that would be the end of my defection, of course.
Well, when did you finally make it to the United States?
In 1970, after about 6 months of debriefing in Athens by the CIA, and I presume FBI too, they let me go first to Germany, then to Canada. That was my decision. I had to change my identity to protect my family and my friends in USSR. And also I was a little bit paranoid knowing that both Soviet KGB and probably some double agents within the American system may be after me. So I wanted to settle down as far away as possible. I requested CIA to give me some kind of new identity and just let me go on my own. And I settled in Canada. I was a student. I changed many professions, from farm help and laundry truck driver to language instructor and broadcaster for Canadian Broadcasting Corporations in Montreal.
Well, have you had any
knew it.
threats?
Yuri's biggest sin, becoming a journalist.
Well, even worse, because of his inherent communist nature, he was attracted to the Canadian Broadcasting Channel. So
Exactly. He went to Canada willingly. Can you imagine doing that to yourself?
I just sad.
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 Sad. Don't go to Canada.
On your life
Absolutely.
or any
Yes.
unpleasant career?
In about 5 years, KGB eventually discovered that I am working for Canadian Broadcasting. I made a very big mistake. I started working for overseas service of CBC, which is similar to Voice of America, in Russian language. And of course, monitoring service in USSR picked up every new voice. Every new announcer they would make it a point to discover who he is. And in 5 years, sure enough, slowly but surely, they discovered that I am not Thomas Schumann, that I am Yuri Alexandrovich Bezmenov, and that I'm working for Canadian Broadcasting, and undermining beautiful détente between Canada and USSR. And the Soviet ambassador Alexander Yakovlev made it his personal effort to discredit me. He complained to Pierre Trudeau, who is known to be a little bit soft on socialism.
You catch that name? Trudeau. They've literally always been communists.
Well, Pierre Trudeau, the current Trudeau's dad,
Is he though?
was very much. Okay, the current Trudeau's alleged dad.
Father figure.
Father figure. There we go. That's very, very charitable of you. Father figure. There you go. He was every bit as much of a authoritarian tyrant as his son is. So, hey, good times.
Yeah.
And he consorted with the Communist Party of his day, which was Cuba and the Soviet Union, just as his son now consorts with China and people like that. Trees and fruit not fallen far from them.
And the management of CBC behaved in a very strange, cowardly way, unbecoming to representatives of an independent country like Canada. They listened to every suggestion that Soviet ambassador gave, and they started shameful investigation, analyzing content of my broadcasts to USSR. And sure enough, they discovered that some of my statements were probably would be offending to the Soviet Politburo. So I had to leave my job. And of course, subtle intimidations. They would say something like, please cross the street carefully because, you know, traffic is very heavy in Quebec. And fortunately, I know about the psychology and
remember, if you see these people at a gas station, at a department store, at a restaurant, you need to let them know that they're not welcome here.
Thank you, Congresswoman Waters.
Like, this is what I'm talking about. These tactics are used by our ideological enemies, regardless of current political alignment. Our political enemies use these tactics, and you will know them by their actions. not by their individual words, not by what colors they wear, but by their actions, because actions will always speak louder than words. You can say you're on our side ideologically till the cows come home, but if you act like the enemy, you are the enemy. It's the way it always was, the way it always will be.
Wes, are you saying that I could say things like and other such words, and I might not actually mean them in such an offensive context?
I don't know what you're talking about. I would never use words like that.
The logic of activity of the KGB, and I never allowed myself to be intimidated. This is the word.
I know it's a quick repause, but that is one of the most important takeaways from this. Never let yourself get intimidated. Never let them get to you. Have the will to push through it, because you can see them trying to intimidate you. You always can. When you get that little feeling in the back of your head of, is this person trying to put me on notice? The answer is usually yes, and it usually means you're on the right track.
And also, there's another thing that you need to look out for, which is your own intimidation, because you have been browbeaten your entire life. You've been browbeaten in grade school. You've been browbeaten by those whom you considered your teachers, your mentors, your people that you respected, to not speak up against stuff like that. You might not even realize you're doing it, but you're doing it. That little voice in the back of your head going, "Oh, I shouldn't say anything. Oh, I don't want to make waves. Oh, I don't want to cause trouble." When you see something that is inherently wrong going on, when you see people who are trying to subvert others, who are trying to intimidate others, when it comes to something as simple as a political conversation, where it's appropriate, of course, there are always degrees. But if you see something like that, where some people are having an open discussion and you see other people trying to just browbeat someone into submission, speak out against it. Say something. It's the right thing to do. It's the American thing to do. Nothing else. It's the American thing to do.
The bystander effect is a very, very real thing, and it applies to more than just seeing, physical violence take place.
Oh, yeah. Ideological violence as well. Well, I don't want to use that term. Ideological intimidation, because words cannot be violent.
It's mostly peaceful intimidation, Wes.
I mean, yes, absolutely.
Fiery but peaceful intimidation.
A little bit of Molotov cocktail between friends. But,
what's a burn business between comrades?
Oh, well, their insurance will cover it, right? Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Except all the times that it didn't. Anyway, this whole thing of I don't want to. I don't care, guys. I just want to be the neutral one. Oh, it's not my business. I just want to be here. I just want to hang out. That's all well and good. But you understand that the only thing that is required for evil to flourish is for good men to do nothing. If you just sit there and you let it happen, and you know you can do something, that's going to build up on you. It's going to build up on you spiritually. It's going to build up on you emotionally. And while, yes, use your discretion, yes, if you can, be a bit more subtle about it, but you need to speak out against stuff like that. Because that type of browbeating, that type of ideological intimidation is the very type of thing that these authoritarians are itching for you to do. They need you to do nothing. They need you to just look aside and just go, "Oh, it's not my business." Because here's the thing. We will always outnumber them. Always. We will always outnumber them. We just need to act. You need to be aware that we will always outnumber them. Because the authoritarians are very, very few in number when the chips are down. Always remember that. Never be afraid to speak up. Even if you're the only one in the room that's brave enough to do it, never be afraid to speak up. Even if you think you're going to sound foolish, don't be afraid to speak up. Because even if you do, fall on your face, make an ass out of yourself, embarrass yourself, you know what's going to happen? You're going to get a little better at it. And then you know what's going to happen next time? You're going to be a little less afraid to do it next time. And you're going to sit in front of that mirror, and you're going to practice what you say next time. And you're going to browbeat it into yourself. You are going to push yourself farther. You are going to push yourself harder. You are going to make it so that the next time you say something, you're going to say it a little bit more eloquently and a little bit better. And you're going to be a little bit more concise. And you're going to be a little bit better at the responses. Every time you do it, you'll get a little bit better. That's why you shouldn't stop yourself. Because once you start censoring yourself, you'll never stop. Don't censor yourself. Use discretion, but don't censor yourself. It's the worst thing you can do. And it is something that our enemies need as many people as possible to do. Now, excuse me, I'm going to step down off of this soapbox.
And I'm gonna take that fucking soapbox. So yeah, when somebody asks you, are you really gonna die on this hill? You look right back at them and you say, somebody is.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, obviously, like I said, like I've said multiple times, use your discretion. If you don't think this is the right battle to fight, fight it later. But don't use that as an excuse.
No time
Use it
and
as
place.
use it as a negotiation term to fight this battle later. Do not use it as a crutch. Do not use it as a self-censor. It's the worst thing you can do.
Who knows, maybe you get pissed off enough at somebody that you start a whole fucking YouTube channel and decide to go on a cultural crusade. That'd be wild. No one ever does that sort of thing.
This isn't about you, Odar. This is about Yuri.
This is what they expect a person, a defector, to be intimidated. Once they spot that you are scared, they keep on developing that line. And then eventually you either have to give up entirely and work for them, or they neutralize you. They would definitely stop all kind of political activity, which they failed to do in my case, because I was stubbornly working for the Canadian Broadcasting. And in response to their intimidations, I said that, look, this is a free country, and I am as free as you are. And I also can drive very fast. And gun control is not yet established in Canada.
Gun control is not yet established in Canada.
Heavy emphasis on yet.
And also, this is...
But hey...
Yeah, go ahead.
But hey, you know, I'm sure it's only a matter of time before some asshole who's definitely not the Canadian equivalent of a Fed will shoot a couple people over a distance of multiple provinces and just happens to intentionally violate almost every gun law that they have as an excuse to enforce more gun laws and set up even more authoritarian control over Canadians' ability to defend themselves. I'm sure that's never going to happen.
That never
That's
happens.
never going to
Governments never do false flags like that. That doesn't happen.
Absolutely not.
That'd be a Waco theory. Completely Waco. And also a great example of why America's Second Amendment is so important. They can't intimidate you as thoroughly if you could meet them with the business end of a fucking shotgun. If you have the ability to fight back, they can't push as hard.
And they haven't pushed as hard here yet, even though they have tried. They have tried to violate the Second Amendment multiple times. Yep. But we can't let them.
I think the most notable example is either the 2016 or 2018 election, back when the previous governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, was in power there. I say in power because he was effectively a petty tyrant. And he proposed stricter gun regulation than California had at the time. And what happened was basically every single county in the state of Virginia deputized every gun owner. Pretty much every county did it. And then there was then there was a massive open carry demonstration at the Virginia State House. And you know what happened after this and one other slip up that's not really within the purview of this discussion? After Northam did that, Virginia elected one of the most freedom-minded governors they've ever had.
Very good.
You can push back. You can always push back.
So I had a couple of good shotguns in my basement. So welcome to visit me someday with your Kalashnikov's machine guns. So obviously it didn't work. Intimidation didn't work. So they tried different approach, as I described. They approached on the highest level, on the level of Canadian bureaucracy.
And on that level they were
on
successful.
that level they were successful. On individual level they failed flat.
Mr. Bezmenov has brought a series of slides with him that he has taken from the Soviet Union, and I think this is a good time to take a look at the slides.
Yes.
Now,
Here's another spot where it's just interesting to hear Yuri tell his story. Once again, there's not really going to be too much we can add to this. It's just more interesting context on his life.
the viewers will be able to see these slides as we talk about them.
Yes, this is a collection of slides which are, some of them are snapshots from my family. And by the end of my training in school, I was recruited by the KGB. This picture was taken on that day, and you can see again how happy it feels to be recruited by the KGB.
Our conversation with Yuri Alexandrovich Bezmenov, who is a defector from the Soviet Union, a former propaganda agent for Novosti and the KGB, will continue after this message.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. That is, in fact, a fantastic place to stop for now. Wes,
Absolutely.
you got any kind of thoughts you want to throw on the end of this?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of points that Yuri makes, and we do have to kind of hit them hard. But there's a lot more to this, and we've got a whole nother one after we're done with this interview. So stick with us here. We're going to be going down some deep dives. We're going to be explaining some stuff, and I think y'all are going to like this. This is something that I personally have been asked to do several times, and I'm glad we're finally doing it. I'm glad you rustled me up, and you woke me from my long slumber, Odar, so that we can actually get this done. So I thank you for that.
This is incredibly important stuff, and understanding why knowledge of demoralization is important and knowing how to recognize it is important. It just unlocks, frankly, the keys to the kingdom. It helps you understand so much, like why Hoffa says, okay, it's fine to just reframe literally all of history to say that this one thing is bad. Anyway, we'll see you next time.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Jesus fucking Christ.
All right, prima donna. Control your...
I can't work like...
Dude.
I'm going back to my trailer.